1998 through 2004 Honda Odyssey with the 3.5 liter engine. Power steering pump replacement. I'm Brian Esser from How To Automotive. I'm going to walk you step by step through the process of changing out that power steering pump. So we're going to be using a factory pump and Honda power steering fluid in this job. I will put links for them in the description of the video. So recently we put a rebuilt pump on this vehicle, and at idle there was no power steering assist. The pressure was too low for the pump. The pump was defective. And if you increase the RPMs, you would have power steering assist. The original pump was working fine. It was just leaking fluid. That was the reason why we changed it. So doing these jobs, I recommend, if you can, use factory parts. It makes a big difference. So when you're replacing the pump with a factory one, it comes with a new pulley. If you're using an aftermarket pump or a rebuilt, you'll have to take the pulley off your old pump and transfer it over to your new pump. The first thing you're going to want to do is remove the cap from the reservoir and suck out as much of the fluid as you possibly can. I'm using a fluid extractor here. But if you don't have something like this, you can use like a turkey baster and suck out the fluid. This will reduce the amount of fluid that spills all over the engine bay when we do this job. So we're going to take this feed hose off. Before you do, you might want to put a rag underneath here to help catch some of the fluid that's going to spill out and absorb it. So you'll need a pair of hose clamp pliers or a pair of pliers and squeeze the clamp and pull it back. And then once you get it pulled back, you should be able to just pull the hose right off the fitting here. Some fluid is going to spill out. That's why we put the rag here to catch it. So now you can just take the hose and kind of just tuck it out of your way. Now we're going to remove the two 10mm bolts here at the top of the pump here to remove the high pressure line. Once you get the two bolts removed, you're just going to lift the hose straight off, and then you're going to set it aside. You may want to have a rag ready also to place the hose on. So I just let it rest right here on top of the engine cover with a rag underneath it. The next step is to remove the belt. We're going to loosen up the bolt here in the back. It's a 12mm bolt. I'm just using a little ratchet with a little extension. A deep socket will work just fine. So just crack the bolt free a few threads. Once you get it loose, then you can go ahead and remove the rag from underneath here, and then we're going to get to the bolt that's underneath. It's actually a nut that we're going to remove. So at the bottom of the pump is a second 12mm nut that we need to loosen up. To get that, I use a semi-wobbly socket. It's the shortest one they make. It's about a 1-inch one, and a 12mm socket here, and then you can get it right in here and crack it free. You can also use like a wobbly socket. We'll get in there too. Now we're going to back this 12mm nut right here. This is the tensioner adjuster here. So you're going to need a deep 12mm socket and an extension here, and then you're going to back that nut off almost all the way. And that's going to loosen up the tension on the belt. Then you can slip the belt off like this. If your belt is old and need to be replaced, you'll have to remove the motor mount, and you'll also have to take off the main drive belt just in front of it here. But in my case, the belt is fairly new, so we're just going to reuse it. So now the bolt here in the back, we're just going to take that completely out now. And then after that, we're going to take the nut off the bottom so you can lift the pump upwards, rotate it upwards, and you can get to the other nut easier. So once you get the back one off, you'll lift this pump upwards, and then you can get your fingers down there. You can usually spin these off by hand. If you can't, what I like to do is use a 12mm wobbly socket, a 1/4-inch one here. Then you can spin that bottom bolt off easily with the wobbly socket. Now that you got those two bolts out, you can just lift the pump out. After that, you can use some part spray cleaner and clean up the power steering fluid mess here. Clean it up as best you can. I like to actually wash these after I'm done with a pressure washer. The hardest part of the job is to get this adjuster here to stay in place when you start the pump. This little bolt likes to slide inwards, and so it's kind of a challenge to get the power steering pump back on there and get the nut started. One of the techniques I do is pull the adjuster up like this here and hold it with one hand and then slide the pump on. And so once you slide it on the bottom down there, then you can go ahead and start the bolt here at the top first. And once you get that bolt started at the top, then you can pull the pump upwards like this, and then you can snug this back bolt up, and it'll hold the pump up in the air, allowing you to get the nut started on the bottom here much easier. Another tip that I use is use a pencil magnet like this, and I put it on the tip of the bolt here because it likes to push in, and then that'll help pull the bolt out where you can get to the threads to start on the little nut. To start that nut, I like to take my wobbly socket and put a piece of paper in the socket and install the nut on it, and that'll hold the nut into the socket like this, and then you can feed it down into position and easily start that nut. So once you get the bottom nut started, you can loosen up the bolt in the back here and push the pump down. Now you can go ahead and slip your belt on. You also want to look down towards the crank there and make sure that the belt is sitting in all the grooves and not misaligned in any way. Now we're going to tighten up the 12mm adjuster nut there, and that's going to pull the pump upwards and tighten the belt at the same time. I like to do this part by hand with the hand tools, and make sure you don't over tighten the belt. That will put strain on the new pump and cause it to wear out prematurely. So you want to just tighten it until you can barely twist the belt 90 degrees, and that should be tight enough. Now that you got the belt tension right, you can go ahead and tighten up the nut and the belt and the bolt in the back here. Tighten those both up. After that, you can slip on the feed hose here and put the clamp on. Then you can put the pressure line back on, and you just push it back down into place and start the two 10mm bolts and tighten those up. So now I've filled up the reservoir with Honda approved fluid. I filled it all the way up to the top of the bottle. And then when we start this, the level is going to drop down, and you can see the little hash marks where the level is supposed to be. So we're going to start this vehicle up. We're going to let it run for about a minute or two without turning the wheels or anything, and just let it idle for about a minute or two and adjust our fluid levels as needed. Then we're going to come in and cycle the steering wheel from lock to lock, all the way left and all the way right a couple times. After that, we're going to double check our fluid level. I will link up all the parts and tools that I used in this video in the description. I also wanted to mention to you that I have a tool store that I will put links in the description for. It has all the top tools that I use on a day-to-day basis to make repairs like this. I'm Brian Essick from How To Automotive. I'd like to thank you guys for watching my videos, encourage you to subscribe, invite you to head over to the howtoautomotive.com website for more valuable videos like this. Thank you again for watching.